Welcome back, folks, to How to Play series of Basic Impetus, Part 5. And this time we're going to go into detail about the interpenetration rules and how units move through each other during a battle. And we're also going to touch on pursuits and retreat moves after combat, and in regards to interpenetration, see how that works. I hope you enjoy. Hope you learned something about Basic Impetus in this next episode. So let's get right to it. At this point, I'd like to take a look at what the rules call interpenetration, or the passing through of units. It's basically how your units move through each other. The game rules basically have two types. There is voluntary interpenetration, which normally occurs during a unit's activation as it moves about the table, wheeling, moving forward, and so on. And then there's involuntary interpenetration, which occurs as the result of close combat or melee, and moves like a pursuit or a retreat, and we'll get into that later. Okay, so let's look at voluntary interpenetration. First of all, we need to keep in mind that there's only 4 units in the game that have to be involved for interpenetration to take place, and they are skirmishers, light cavalry, artillery, and Wagenburg. If one of those 4 types is not being interpenetrated or doing the interpenetration, then it can't occur. So let's look at these 4 unit types one by one. Alright, first of all, we have skirmishers. Now, these are the most versatile of troops. They can be interpenetrated by any troops in your army, and can also interpenetrate any units in your army. So they can pretty much be moved through and move through anybody in your army. Next up is light cav, which, like skirmishers, they can move through and be moved through by anybody, but the only unit types that can pass through them, and they can pass through, are light cavalry, medium cavalry, heavy cavalry, and of course skirmishers. So basically all your mounted cavalry troops, as well as skirmishers. And finally, we have the artillery and Wagenburg, and they pretty much have a loose formation when they're sitting there deployed for battle, and they can be moved through by all your troop types without any problem. But they may not interpenetrate other friendly units unless they're skirmishers. The ever-versatile skirmisher. So those are the 4 unit types that pretty much have to be involved in the interpenetration for it to take place. Now, assuming that is the case, there is also 2 things to keep in mind that will prevent an interpenetration. And the first is enemy units. You cannot interpenetrate an enemy unit. For instance, you can't move through an enemy skirmish unit. You can't do it. Secondly, friendly units that are in contact with the enemy, i.e. in melee, you cannot interpenetrate. So even if your skirmisher unit is a unit you can move through normally, if it's in contact with the enemy fighting for its life, you can't move through it. So we need to keep those 2 things in mind. Well, let's take a look at the actual rules for interpenetration and how it's actually carried out on the table. Basically, how it works is the moving unit moves as usual. It makes its wheel, it's straightforward, or it's to the rear move, or charge, or whatever, and it moves through, preferably completely, the intervening unit, just as normal. No special rules. However, if the unit with its maximum movement cannot completely clear the unit that's intervening, where it actually ends its movement depends. It depends on how far they can move through the intervening unit. Now, if they can move at least halfway through the intervening unit, they end actually in front of the unit and in contact. If they cannot move at least halfway through the intervening unit, instead they end their move to the rear of that unit and in contact. Now, there is an exception to this, and that is skirmishers, which basically is no matter how far you move through a skirmisher unit, unless it's completely through, you end your movement there. You pick up the skirmishers and you move them directly to the rear of the moving unit and in contact with them. So they're the exception. Now let's take a look at some examples. Okay, in front of us we got some heavy foot right here, and they are preceded by a unit of skirmishers who they are in contact with. This unit of heavy foot has a movement rate of 5 centimeters, and it wants to move straight ahead through the skirmishers. Now, what it does is it measures its 5 centimeters, which is right there, and see how far we can get through these guys. And that would put them right here. And that's basically how that move would work. I completely moved through this base of skirmishers, so no special rules apply. I just make my move. Now, down here, we got some heavy cavalry. Now, they also want to move through these skirmishers up ahead. Now, their movement is 8 centimeters. And if we look at that, 8 centimeters takes us to a position there. Now, regardless of how far I actually move through the skirmishers, it doesn't matter. This is where I end my move, 8 centimeters away. I pick up the skirmishers, move them out of the way, put my cavalry at 8 centimeters, and these skirmishers would actually be placed right behind the moving unit, just like that. So that's how they would work. Now up here, I've got a unit of light infantry. They're disordered, but that doesn't play any role in it. Doesn't prevent any interpenetration or cause any disorder, further disorder, or whatever. So that's ignored. And up here, we have some skirmishers who want to make a rear move behind this unit. If we take a look here, they move 8 centimeters. And that move would take them to about there, mostly through this unit of light infantry. So that means I would end my move directly behind this unit, like that. So the skirmishers' rear movement would take them to there. And finally, over here, I've got a unit of heavy cav, and they want to make an oblique move to the front in that direction, through this unit of light cavalry, who are also disordered, but again, that plays no role. So, let's see. I want an oblique, so I'm going to move my 8 centimeters that direction. And it takes me more than halfway through the light cav, which means instead of ending my move here, I will end my move directly here, along that same path, in front of and through the unit of light cavalry. So that's where I would end my move. So those are some examples of successful interpenetrations and how we carry them out. Looking at some more examples, here we have some interesting situations. Right here we have a unit of heavy cav, moves 8, and next to them on the right flank is a unit of light cav. Now these heavy cav want to go over here. They want to get on the right side of these light cav, and they'd use, what they would use there is one of those sideways moves to do that. Well, let's measure their movement. They move 8 centimeters, and that will take them not completely through, but to about that point. So they qualify as interpenetrating the light cav and are placed on the opposite side, which would put them right there. So there, that's a legal interpenetration. Now at this point, the skirmishers would like to move in front of the light cav. Now their movement is also 8, and if we measure that, it's right there, which puts them beyond halfway through the light cav. And if you remember, skirmishers can move through everybody. So that would put them there, but because they are more than half, they're put on the other side, and that's where they'd end their move. Now, here's some examples of interpenetration that doesn't work. In this case, we've got some skirmishers. They want to move in front of these 2 units of infantry. One heavy cav, one light infantry. Well, let's measure their distance and see what's going on. They move 8, which will take them to about here. Now, if you see that, they pass completely through the light infantry, which, if these heavy infantry weren't there, these guys would be put in front of the light infantry. But that's not the case. But because they don't pass halfway through the heavy infantry as well, they do not pass through. So what happens in this case, it might get through the light infantry, but not the heavy infantry. So it would end its move behind the light infantry in contact, just like that. And finally, over here, got some skirmishers once again, the ever popular skirmishers, and they would like to move in front of these cav and infantry. Now, they move 8 centimeters, which takes them to about there, which again completely passes the halfway mark of this heavy infantry unit, but only about a quarter of the way through the heavy cav. So what do? Well, they can pass through these guys, but not these guys. But because they're using a forward move, they would have to end their move in contact with the heavy infantry, just like that, and that would be a failed interpenetration. They wouldn't be able to do it. Now let's take a look at retreats. Now, this is your involuntary type of interpenetration that we're going to be discussing here. And again, it involves close combat. In this case, we're going to look at the retreats. Let's look at some examples. Now here we have a situation where 2 heavy foot units are in combat with 2 heavy cav units. And let's assume that the heavy foot units have both had a bad day and they're forced to retreat. Now, in the case of this unit here, they've lost the combat and are forced to retreat. Now here we have some friendly skirmishers that are directly behind them. Now, in a retreat move, the unit moves straight back a certain distance. In this case, let's assume it's 3 centimeters distance. Now, if we measure that, we'll see that will take them into this unit of skirmishers. Now, when you're retreating, you have two options, usually. Not always, but usually. You have two maximum options. One is to interpenetrate the unit that is behind you, your retreat, intervening. And the second one will be to push them back if you can't interpenetrate them. Now, in this case, this unit of skirmishers can be interpenetrated. So I do have the option of interpenetrating them or pushing them back. In this case, I want to interpenetrate them. So let's see how that looks. Well, first of all, I would move my 3 centimeters. Now this is a normal interpenetration, and it would end on top of the skirmishers. And if we remember, with skirmishers, we simply move them out of the way, finish the movement of our movers here, the retreaters, and the skirmishers would end here in contact with them in this direction. So that's what would happen there. Now in this case over here, let's assume this foot unit as well is going to retreat 3 centimeters. Now if we look at this, that will take them into contact with this friendly unit of heavy foot back here. Well, this isn't a unit they can interpenetrate, so that's not an option. So the only option they have is to actually push this unit of heavy foot back. So if we measure this 3 centimeter retreat, it goes all the way back to about there. So this unit here would go backwards with them, and the result of that is it would be disordered, because if you are pushed back, you are disordered. So that's what would happen there. Now, one other interesting option that could happen here, let's put this guy back, is what if this unit here was actually in combat as well, in contact with these enemy light infantry? What would happen? Well, when that happens, the option of pushing this unit back does not exist when this unit here retreats. So they won't be able to push them back. So this unit here would make its retreat of 3 centimeters, which it wouldn't be able to do. It would stop at, say, about 2, into contact with this unit, and immediately it disorders this unit. Now again, this unit would not be pushed back because it's in melee contact. And also, this unit retreating could not interpenetrate this unit because it's not a type it could interpenetrate. So it has no option. So in this case, it moves into contact and stops, disordering the unit it contacts. So that's how a retreat would be handled. Now let's take a look at pursuit interpenetrations that can occur as a result of combat. And I should also say that this also applies to any units that have to make compulsory forward movements, such as chariots. But in this case, we're going to look at the pursuit move. Let's look over here. In this case, we have some victorious heavy cavalry that are on our side, and they've won their combat. They've defeated this unit of heavy infantry, which was routed and thus removed from the battlefield. Up here we have some friendly light cav. Now, this unit of heavy cav must pursue, in this case, we'll say 6 centimeters. Now, these guys are going to be in the way of this pursuit move. Now, the options this unit has is that it can interpenetrate this unit if it's able to do so normally, which it is, or it could stop upon contact and disorder the unit that it contacts, the light cavalry. But in this case, because it's a unit that it can interpenetrate, it will do so. It moves a total of 6, which will take it more than halfway through this unit, and that qualifies as an interpenetration. So that's its max move, but because it's interpenetrating, it's put all the way in front of the light cav in contact like that. So that would be its pursuit move, and it would not disorder the light cav. Now in this case over here, a little similar situation. We've got our victorious heavy cav, and they've just defeated and routed this enemy unit of skirmishers, which again are removed, and it has to make a pursuit move of, say, 6 centimeters. Now this friendly unit up here of heavy foot is going to be interpenetrated because of that. But unfortunately, these are heavy cav, these are heavy foot. Interpenetration is not normally possible. So what happens? Well, the unit would move as far as it possibly could, which would be contact with this unit. So it wouldn't be able to move its full 6 pursuit move. it would stop on contact and immediately disorder the heavy foot. So that's how pursuit interpenetrations work. Okay, folks, that brings part 5 of the How to Play series, Basic Impetus, to a conclusion. Everything about interpenetration I think we covered pretty good, including pursuits and retreat moves. I hope it helped. In the next part, in part 6, we should be going in detail about terrain and how it affects movement, as well as zones of control and any other little odds and ends that should be covered regarding movement. And that'll be coming up in part 6. And shortly thereafter, I think we're going to start getting into combat shooting, followed by melee, I think. So, yeah, I hope you enjoyed. Hope it helped. And if you have any questions, be sure to message me. I'm always available to answer questions on impetus. And I hope you enjoyed. Okay, folks, till next time, take care.